Well, hey everybody. Welcome to the show. I guess this is a show. It's show-ish. But anyway, thank you for joining me once again for my latest Ask Away live stream. As usually the case, everybody who is with me right now on the live chat, hi, thanks for being here. If you have questions in the live chat, just hold on to them for a little bit because I'm going to take pre-submitted questions from my Patreon patrons first. And then once I get through those, we'll spend the rest of the show hanging out together in the live chat. Now you can ask me whatever you want for 90 minutes. The show will be 90 minutes, I swear. And the only reason it was longer than 90 minutes last time was because my internet went out twice, and hopefully that will not happen this time. Fingers crossed. Not superstitious, but it can't hurt, right? It can't help, but it can't hurt. Before I get into the patron questions, though, there's one thing I do want to mention that is a little unusual. I always sort of push the fundraisers that are linked in the description of the video, and the fundraisers that are always there are still there for our friends Lady Columbia and Phoenix Rising and Joanna and Aaron. They all need a bit of help, and as is usually the case, I will ask anybody watching who has a few bucks. If you can help them out in their situations, please go to their fundraising pages or their PayPals and help them out as much as you can, or at the very least share their fundraising pages around so that other people can see, and perhaps if they're in a more of a position to contribute than you are at the moment, please help them out. And you'll notice if you look at the description of the video, there is a brand new link at the top. And that's for my best buddy, Jason Harding, who is also my podcast co-host. Actually, it's more proper to say that I'm his co-host. He is the creative genius, the driving force behind the Let Me Listen podcasts, two of which I am very, very happy and fortunate to be a co-host of. Those would be Late Seating and the Ensign's Log, and I'll mention them both at the end as well. But Jason has run into some hard financial times. And I just found out about this yesterday, and he needs some money, like, immediately so that he and his family can relocate to a new living space because they've run into some financial difficulties, a lot of debt, sort of coupled with the ridiculously high cost of living in California where they are, and it's just all sort of piled up, and now it's all come due, and it's sort of an emergency. So I have the link in the description, and also I'll show it to you here on the screen. This is the fundraiser by Jason. It's at GoFundMe Emergency Housing, and there he is. Like, what a handsome guy, really. I mean, how could you say no? How could you say no to that face? If you have any coins in your couch, give them to that guy, would you? Look at that. And a spot of good news, as you can see, the fundraising goal is $4,000, which is a lot, but is certainly not unattainable. And this was just put up yesterday. He's already more than halfway to the goal, which just, as I said on Twitter earlier today, just fills my heart. It makes me so happy to see how quickly this has gone, where it looks like he's almost certainly going to reach his goal at some point, hopefully soon, because he's already more than halfway there. So that's not, I shared it on Twitter and Facebook and in my YouTube community feed yesterday, and I'm mentioning it now. So hopefully if anybody watching this knows Jason or knows me and is able to contribute to help him out, you will do so. And again, if you can't afford it, if you just don't have the money, that's completely fine. That's understandable. But please at least share the link to the GoFundMe on your social media and let other people know and kind of spread the word, because Jason's one of my best friends. And the podcasts that we do together are some of the favorite things I have ever done. That's the highlight of my fortnight, because we record every 2 weeks. So it's the highlight of every 2 weeks is when we hang out for a few hours on Skype on a Sunday and record Late Seating and record Ensign's Log. And he needs some help. So if you can possibly help him, either by donating yourself or by sharing to let other people know who might be able to donate, please do so. Because you couldn't imagine a more deserving guy, who, you know, again, he's one of the best people I know. So please, help him out in any way that you're able to. And not to shortchange the other fundraisers in the description as well, because they're all wonderful people. But Jason is, like I said, he's one of my favorite people in the world. So help him out if you possibly can. Now, let's see about some questions. As usual, I will be answering from my Patreon patrons. Let's see what the patrons have had to say this time. Here we go. The first question from a patron is from Chris Sanders, and he says, "You've stated you're a pro wrestling fan. Do you think AEW is going to be legitimate competition for WWE?" I love wrestling questions. It's so nice to... I'm glad that this was the first question submitted, because I love talking wrestling, and I don't get to do it as often as I used to. So I don't think that... And for anybody who doesn't know, AEW is All Elite Wrestling. It is a new wrestling company that is being started by... predominantly by Cody Rhodes and Nick and Matt Jackson, who are a tag team called the Young Bucks, and also Kenny Omega is involved. Just some of the biggest stars in North American pro wrestling that have not been signed by the WWE. Cody, of course, wrestled for WWE for many years, but then left a couple years ago and has been on the independent circuit and has really made a name for himself on his own and with Ring of Honor and other sort of smaller companies. But AEW is their baby. It's their new company. And their first official AEW show is in May. They held an independent show last year called All In before they officially founded All Elite Wrestling. That was a big success and was a pretty good show. So I think it's going to be a successful company. I think it's going to provide an alternative to WWE. I think there's certainly a big enough audience for them and for the type of wrestling they do that they will be able to make a go of it and continue to run shows and be successful and maybe even get a TV deal or some kind of distribution, whether it's streaming or traditional TV or whatever. So I think that that the company will have legs for a while. But will it be competition for WWE? I don't know. I would like it to be, because I don't watch WWE anymore for ethical as well as reasons of just personal taste. I don't really like the product. So it would be great to have another wrestling company to watch. And to have somewhere else to go to get my pro wrestling fix. There are other companies that fill that sort of void for me right now. Anyway, there's Major League Wrestling and Ring of Honor and New Japan Wrestling, Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. There's a bunch of different wrestling products that are all very different from each other and very different from WWE, and that I watch and enjoy a great deal. And I would love to add AEW to that watch list. I don't think it'll be like serious competition for WWE, at least not anytime soon. Maybe if it sticks around for a while and it's able to build up a big enough audience and maybe gets a TV deal and gets decent ratings and puts on a good enough show, maybe eventually, but not right away. No, I'm just hoping for it to be a viable alternative. But we'll see. Who knows? Next question is from Michael Bryan. Dear Mr. Shives, first allow me to address my criticism of the release version of Superman Returns' soundtrack. My comment was aimed at the release itself, and not Ottman's work. I am a bit of a prude when it comes to release versions of soundtrack. I prefer the complete work to the overly curated highlight albums that are widely released. With that in mind, I have another Superman Returns related query. What would you have liked to have seen in a sequel? Where would you have liked to see the story go? How might you pitch it? We follow up a pro wrestling question with a Superman Returns question. I like how this is going so far. Yeah, well, first of all, I completely understand about the soundtrack thing. I would like for soundtrack albums to be to basically be a collection of all of the soundtrack. What's the term? All of the cues, all of the soundtrack cues from a movie. That would be great. So I completely understand that criticism. And yeah, for a Superman Returns sequel, what would be a pitch for a good sequel? It would be nice to see a villain on screen, a Superman villain on screen that we haven't seen on screen before. Maybe something like Brainiac. I feel like they've already done General Zod. When Superman Returns came out, they had done General Zod once, and now they've done General Zod twice. They did a version of Doomsday in Batman v Superman. So it'd be nice to see a villain that hasn't been seen in live action on the big screen yet. Something like Brainiac, or maybe if they want to go completely out of left field and really try something different, maybe like Mr. Mix, which I don't know what that story would be. I don't know if I would be the best writer to tell a Mixias Pitalik story, but the potential is there, you know? Or maybe something like Metallo, or sort of like a classic Superman comic book villain that could be a match for Superman in terms of physically, and also provide thematic material for a really good story, like I feel Superman Returns had. I know a lot of people don't like Superman Returns, but it's still my favorite superhero movie. So yeah, something like that. I don't have a pitch. Like, I can't tell you what the movie would be about. I would love for them to have continued the story that we saw in Superman Returns, with Superman / Clark having to make something work with Lois, and also with Lois's not quite husband, Richard. I would not want to write Richard out. I like Richard. I think he should have stayed. I think he was a really great character. I think having Lois and Clark still have feelings for each other and still be very deeply invested in one another emotionally, but not be together as a couple, is like a really, really interesting space for them to occupy as characters. So I would want to continue that, and not have Richard get killed off, or have her break up with Richard so she could get together with Clark. Like, I just think that's probably the least interesting way you could go with that. But yeah, something like that. Find a really cool villain that hasn't been in a Superman movie before, like Brainiac or Metallo, something like that, and find a way to tell a story about that villain, and about Superman, and about his relationships, and his cast of characters, in a way like Superman Returns did, that was exciting, but was also very emotionally resonant, and was just incredibly beautiful to look at. And also, I might suggest directed by somebody else. Maybe, can we do that? So when I watch the hypothetical fictional never gonna happen Superman Returns sequel, I don't have to feel as icky about it as I do when I watch Superman Returns now, knowing about the many egregious offenses of Bryan Singer. That would be nice too. Let's get somebody else to direct it. Thanks. Next question is from Francois Lacombe. If you were offered the opportunity to acquire any device, machine, weapon, magical object, etc., from any work of fiction, complete with any needed logistical support and detailed instructions on its use, what would it be? Oh, man. I mean, how can I answer anything else other than the holodeck? It's got to be the holodeck. Or, since I'm a Deep Space Nine fan, perhaps I would prefer to term it the Holo Suite. I'll use the Deep Space Nine terminology. A holodeck or a holosuite from Star Trek. That's got to be the answer. I mean, there's all kinds of other cool things that I could ask for, but yeah, the holosuite. And then you would probably never see my ass again. You would find some obscure news article on some website a few weeks after the last time I posted a video about how an obscure YouTuber had been discovered dead from starvation inside his fucking holosuite. That would be the end of my story. But yeah, it would be the holosuite. I think that has to be it for me. Next question is from Nick Anderson. In light of DC's more spirited movies of late, Aquaman, Shazam, do you think a live-action Batman Beyond movie could work? This is assuming you're familiar with this fairly dark series. If not, carry on. I'm not as familiar with Batman Beyond as a lot of people are. I have not seen every episode of it. I've only really seen a handful of episodes of it. And what I saw of it, I thought, okay, this is okay. Like, this is good. I didn't not like it, but it didn't compel me to watch the rest of it. And as a lot of people know who have watched me for a while and have heard me opine on this kind of stuff before, I'm not the biggest fan of the DC animated stuff. Like, I like it, and I certainly appreciate it for its art direction and for its animation and for the most part a really excellent voice cast. But I don't. To me, it's not. A lot of people like the DC animated stuff, Batman the animated series, Superman the animated series, Batman Beyond, Justice League. To them, that's like the best version of those characters, and I just don't feel that way. I don't like it that much. So I never really got into Batman Beyond. But do I think it could work as a movie? Yeah, of course it could. Yeah. If you could hypothetically make a good Batman movie, and you can, it's been done. I think you could hypothetically make a good Batman Beyond movie. Now, I'm not the best person to ask because I'm not as familiar with the show and I'm not sure exactly how you would approach it. But yeah, of course it could. Of course it could. And just because it's a relatively dark series doesn't mean, like, dark doesn't have to mean grim. Dark doesn't have to mean hopeless. Dark doesn't have to mean cynical or joyless. You can make a dark film, visually, thematically, what have you, and still have it be a very exciting, arresting, entertaining, beautiful experience for the audience. You don't have to make it just grim and joyless and hopeless, like I would say the Zack Snyder directed DCEU films were. They're like, why would anybody watch this? This is just so depressing and pretentious and portentous and just bad all around. You don't have to do that if you want to make a dark movie. You can make a dark movie that is not those other things. And sure, if they found the right writer and the right director, of course they could. Of course they could. Next question is from Dr. Babylon Steve. I remember in 2013 when the Democrats nuked the nomination filibuster for all non-Supreme Court nominees. Yes, they were doing it because of Republican obstruction, but it came back to bite them in the ass the very next year when they lost the Senate to the Republicans. Then in 2016, Trump won the White House. Then in 2017, Republicans nuked the Supreme Court filibuster. Recently, Trump declared a national emergency and admitted there isn't any, and he's just doing this to save time. This mentality has infected all sides of the political spectrum. The guy from Humanist Report wants Democrats to nuke the legislative filibuster after they take power in 2021, but he's not thinking ahead to what happens when Democrats lose power again. A few progressives are talking about Sanders court packing like FDR did. Right now, I'm afraid Trump will start packing the Supreme Court if it hands down one too many decisions he disagrees with. I'm not a Republican anymore, but on some issues, my instincts are still conservative, and I do care about checks and balances and limits on power. Why is everyone so short-sighted? Thoughts? I think it's you're right. It's short-sightedness. I agree with that. And also, I think solutions like that, like packing the court or changing the rules of the legislature so that a filibuster is precluded, things like that, they might work in the short term. But not only do they come back to bite you in the ass in the long term when the opposition party takes control again, and they set a very bad precedent as to what sort of thing is allowable. But also, I think functionally, those kinds of changes are just tourniquets. You know, if you change the rules so that your side can get legislation passed without needing quite so many votes, that's good for the short term. And it does have a great practical value because you can get those pieces of legislation through and enacted, perhaps, if you have the support of the president and that you may not have been able to get through otherwise. But the real problem, the real problem is that if you're a Democrat, you should want your party to have enough votes to be able to do that outright. Or at the very least, to have a majority and also have enough reasonable people in the opposition party that there is some kind of bipartisan compromise possible. And right now, I wouldn't say that bipartisanship is impossible, although on certain issues it is. And for certain pieces of legislation it is. And for major reforms it is, because the two parties are so far apart philosophically and ideologically that you're just not going to get significant Republican support for any Democrat-backed bill, no matter how often and how sincerely you seek out their input or you try to bring them on board. It's just not going to happen for really big transformative pieces of legislation right now. So the problem in getting those things passed isn't ultimately solved by just changing the rules so you can get them passed with fewer votes. The problem is solved by getting more members of your party elected so you have more power in the legislature, and by hoping or doing whatever you can to push for more reasonable people to be elected in the opposition party. So that even if you don't have the number of votes that you need in your own party, you can still appeal to reasonable people of goodwill and good faith on the opposite side and say, look, this is important. This is a problem we need to solve for everybody, not just for our side, and jump on board with us and help us find a way to make this happen. But it's a lot easier to just change the rules and to say, well, okay, let's just get rid of the filibuster. Or let's just add more seats to the Supreme Court. Like, it's much easier to just do that. But not only do those fixes turn out to be short-sighted because they can be turned back against you, they also miss solving the underlying problem, which is not having enough of a power base in the first place and not having enough reasonable people of good faith and goodwill on the opposite side. Both of those problems are not very easily solved. But those are the problems, and you can't solve those problems by just changing the rules. Next is a question from Justin Luger. Hi, Steve. Great job, as always, with the Trek content. I used to be a big fan of some of the Trek PC games, A Final Unity, 25th Anniversary, Starfleet Academy, etc. Were you ever into any of those or others? And if so, any favorites? Yeah, when I was a teenager... I was a teenager when 25th Anniversary came out for PC, and then I think a year later or a year or two later, a very similar game came out called Judgement Rights that was just like a sequel to 25th Anniversary. It had the exact same gameplay and very similar, it was structured very similarly. So like each level was presented as though it were an episode of the show, complete with a title and everything. And I loved both of those games. I have both of those installed on my computer now, and I don't play them all that often, but I do play them from time to time. And I'm not a gamer, as most people who watch me regularly know. Like, I'm not a hardcore gamer at all. I think the last gaming magazine I read was Nintendo Power when I was about 13 or 14, and that's because my mom worked at a video store and she would bring home the old issues. You know, I don't go to gaming websites, I don't read gaming magazines, I don't go to gaming forums. I have no idea what the hell is going on in gaming for the most part. But I have those old Star Trek games, and I do play them occasionally. And also, I have a copy of Star Trek Bridge Commander, which my buddy Varjak, Christopher, who is my co-host on Pierre the Chef, gave me many years ago that I have installed on this computer and that I still play every once in a while from time to time. And that's a fun game. So yeah, I guess my favorites would be 25th Anniversary and Judgement Rights and Bridge Commander. And I play the Star Trek Timelines mobile game, like on my phone and on my tablet, and that's fun. But that's just more like a time waster. You know, it doesn't really require a lot of skill. It's just like something to do, you know, but I guess it counts too. So we'll throw Star Trek Timelines in there as well. Next question is from Tom McDonald. Hiya, Tom. Now that you are no longer reading apologetics for An Atheist Reads, which I have to think is a great relief for you, do you read or watch any religious apologists? If so, which ones or what kind of arguments do you follow? Other than Christian movies I have watched for my Why Did I Watch This video series, which I think I would like to do another one for next week. I haven't done one for a couple months because I've been doing a lot of Star Trek stuff. I think I've done a Star Trek video every Wednesday for like the last month and a half or something like that. So this Wednesday's video might be another Why Did I Watch This movie review video about some Christian movie that I haven't picked yet. But other than that, and those have mostly been evangelical films or sort of didactic apologetic films. Other than that, I haven't engaged with apologetics at all since I ended An Atheist Reads. I haven't read anything. I haven't watched anything. I haven't kept up with anything. I haven't paid attention to anybody. So it's like, I'm out. Probably not permanently. I'm sure that I will eventually, out of curiosity, maybe go back and engage with something at some point, maybe even make a video about it. I'm not sure. But for this year so far, and ever since I got done Atheist Reads, and for the foreseeable future, I'm out of the apologetics thing. Yeah. Next question is from David Colby, who says, I often watch Let's Plays of a video game called Hearts of Iron 4. And then he explains what a Let's Play is, which is nice and understandable because I've said repeatedly I don't know shit about video games. But I do actually know what a Let's Play video is. It's a great way to get exposure to a game far too complicated for me to follow. However, while watching several of them, I noticed several really worrying things. Hearts of Iron 4, you see, is an ultra-realistic simulation of the entirety of World War II, wherein you control any country in the world and seek to navigate the years from 1936 to 1950. But in the game, the only fun way to play is to go fascist. There's no real downsides mechanically, and it allows you to declare war on and conquer other countries with impunity, and the gameplay is very war-focused. Playing a peaceful country is essentially sitting around doing nothing until you're attacked and have to defend yourself. Also, the game has absolutely no reference to the friggin' Holocaust or any war crimes committed by anyone other than implied stuff and the use of nuclear weapons, which gets a single text pop-up the first time you use it. The game barely tracks civilian casualties at all, instead focusing entirely on your military manpower. And considering the number of borderline fash comments I see in some HOI4 YouTube channels, e.g. someone suggesting to the Let's Player to play Nazi Germany and only use SS divisions, to which the LPer rightfully responded with no fuck off, I think it's safe to say that this art, while not actively fascist, is at least fash-friendly. Do you think it is the duty of every artist in the world to make their work actively unfriendly to fascists? Yes. And I think if you are not doing that, if you are a public person and you are making, whether you want to call it art or just commentary or whatever, if you're making games or if you're making YouTube videos about games or you're writing books or you're making movies or making television or just making bullshit YouTube videos about your thoughts on Star Trek, just for example, to pick an example just right out of the thin air. Yes, absolutely. Whatever your chosen art form or means of expression, if you are putting yourself out there as a public figure and doing things that are attracting an audience and attracting a following, whether it is a huge following or a relatively small one, you absolutely have a responsibility to draw clear lines and to make your content and yourself and your fandom, your community, whatever spaces you have any influence over, as hostile to fascists and white supremacists and anti-feminists and every other kind of bullshit, authoritarian, bigoted, prejudiced asshole group. All of them should be made to feel as unwelcome as they possibly can. And especially these days, with fascists becoming so emboldened and so prominent, and fascism, like outright fascism, being normalized and accepted and debated and treated like something that isn't incredibly dangerous, it's more important than ever for everybody to do that. For everybody with any kind of a platform or any kind of an outlet to take whatever steps they can. I mean, look, there is a certain point beyond which you can't control the audience you attract, right? But you can damn sure control the kind of audience you are courting, the kind of audience you are trying to appeal to. Some shitty people might still watch your content or enjoy your work. You can't help that. But you can at least do everything you possibly can to make sure you are not courting that audience. And those people know that you're not one of them, that you don't like them, that you don't need them, and you don't want them. And that this, as much as you can make it, this is not for them. People sometimes get annoyed with me in my Star Trek videos when I throw in a joke, like an anti-Trump joke or an anti-fascism joke in a Star Trek video. And they say, you know, I don't understand why you have to make it political, or why can't you just make a video about Star Trek and not talk about politics? And, you know, you're alienating part of your audience. And, you know, And that's the whole reason it's in there. You know, there's two when you put in an anti-fascist joke or an anti-Trump joke, and I kind of repeat myself there because Trump is a fascist, but if you put that kind of content in an otherwise mostly non-political work, and Star Trek itself is extremely political, so it's a little weird for a Star Trek fan to be like, why'd you have to get political? When Star Trek itself is often overtly political. But that being the case, nevertheless, my videos about Star Trek don't necessarily have to be about the political parts or have political messages. So the political stuff is in there, A, to signal solidarity and support to people who agree with me, to people who are anti-fascism, right? To people who are progressive, to people who do support equality and justice. And B, to piss off the people who are against those things and let them know that they aren't wanted here. And that's very important to me. Both of those are very important to me, to let people who share my goals and share my values and are also progressive politically and interested in inclusion and diversity and opposed to fascism and racism and all that other shit, to let them know that I want them to be here. That I'm trying to be one of them, that I would like to be one of them. And I would like us to be allies and be part of a community together. And to the people who are on the opposite side of that, to make sure they never forget that I fucking hate them and I don't want them around. That I consider them my enemy and the enemy of every decent person. And that is the only situation I will accept. Like, I don't want to appeal to them. I don't want to entertain them. I don't want to give them something to watch if they just want to forget about politics. If you support Trump, fuck you. I don't make videos for you. I don't want you here. I don't care what excuses you make. I don't care if you say, well, why can't we just disagree and just talk about Star Trek? That's not what I'm doing. Find someone else to do that. I'm not going to do that. I don't want to do that. I couldn't live with myself if I did that. I am not going to have fascists and far right-wing bigoted assholes in my audience if I can possibly help it. I will do everything I can to alienate you, to drive you away, to make sure you know you're not welcome here. And I honestly think it's the responsibility of everybody to do that. And you don't have to devote your content to that. You can just throw in little jabs here and there. Just make it known where you stand and what your priorities are and what your position is. So it's unambiguous. Gee, I wonder where Steve stands on the whole Trump thing. It's absolutely clear how I feel. And that's by design. You know, so if every time I get one of those comments on a Star Trek video where it's somebody whining about, oh, I was with you until you got political. Well, good. Because I guess that means you're not with me anymore. And that's the idea. So yeah, end of rant. But yes, to answer your question briefly, yes, I do think it is the responsibility of artists to do that. Here's a question from John Burnsy. Hi, Steve. Churchill once said, a lie gets halfway around the world before the truth has a chance to get its pants on. This weekend, I studied something similar. Here's a video of a woman describing saving a man's life in New Zealand and mentioning another man taking 3 people to hospital in his car. And then there's a link to the video. And I added the link to this video to the description of this video. So if you want to watch the video he's referring to, you can go click on the link in the description of this video and check it out. Anyway, John goes on, I retweeted this video on Twitter and Facebook. I got very few replies on Twitter and 1 like on Facebook. I checked the news reports, but I didn't see this video posted in any news forum. Sad. I guess a woman who reminds me of Mr. Fred Rogers' mother's saying, look for the helpers. Yup, that Mr. Rogers. That video wasn't important when you have so many experts, politicians, POV, etc. to cover on your 24-hour news broadcast. In Canada, CTV 24-hour news broadcast assumed that breaking news was the same as station identification from radio stations and kept showing it, only to go right back to the same New Zealand coverage it had been bombcasting for hours. Shake my head. My question is, does this prove that bad news gets halfway around the world before the good news has a chance to get its pants on because bad news is somehow sexier to the media? Also, please post the video somewhere or even show it on your Ask Away stream. I think this woman has as much right to be heard as a quote-unquote expert. And again, that video is linked in the description of this video if you want to go check it out. It's only about a minute long. And yeah, it's difficult to watch because it's not gory or bloody or anything, but it's very emotional. It's an interview with a woman who was there at the scene after the shooting in Christchurch and was helping people and describing other people helping victims of the shooting. And I mean, she's an incredibly admirable person. You know, she was doing anything that a person in that situation could possibly have been asked to do, and still wishing she could have done more. It's beautiful and sad. And if you haven't seen it, find the link in my description and check it out. And yeah, unfortunately, bad news does have more of a hook than good news. I don't know why that is. It's human nature. It's a part of human nature. But yeah, I think that saying has a lot of truth to it. And I think we're all sort of guilty of that. We're all guilty of being more attracted to bad news. Maybe it's because we have this instinct of what's going to happen. You know, when you hear bad news, especially when you hear bad news about something that just happened or that is ongoing or that potentially has repercussions for you or for your community, a lot of the draw of that is you want to see what happens next. What's going on? What's going to happen? And it's just innately compelling. And for whatever reason, good news doesn't have that same pull. And that's a shame. Because you're right, that the video of that woman and videos and stories of people who did the same thing, because, you know, she was far from the only one who was there trying to help and was helping. They deserve just as much attention as the bad news, as the sad news, as the tragic news. And they don't usually get it. Or if they do get it, it's as an afterthought. And that's a shame. That really is. I mean, we need to hear the bad news, you know. If the bad news is important, if the bad news is relevant, we need to hear it. We need to hear what happened to Christchurch. But we need to hear how people were trying to help, too. Because that can be encouraging, and that's important. And that can remind us that even when terrible things like that happen, the world isn't completely made of shit. Like, there are good people who are there, who, when pushed into that situation, when faced with the opportunity to do something brave, to do something compassionate, to help somebody in need, they will do that. They will rush in and do that. And it's important that we don't forget that. You know, so yeah, it's a shame that the bad news is so much more attractive to us. But yeah, if you haven't watched that video, take a minute and check that video out at some point. Here's one from Andrew Hawkins. Hey, Steve, let's imagine that by some twist of fate, you're the most popular YouTuber in the world, with millions of subscribers and millions of dollars. At what point would you say to yourself, you know what, I'm good. I think I'll buy a house in the Catskills and retire. I don't know if I would ever retire, but I would probably cut back to maybe just a Steve and Stuffy video every couple of weeks, you know, instead of doing 3 videos at least every week. I would definitely pull back my production, and I would still probably do the Star Trek videos because I honestly, God damn it, I could talk about Star Trek all day. But do Steve and Stuffy videos, do a much more relaxed production schedule and a much more irregular production schedule where I would really be able to take my time and take time to really do a good job at writing something and producing it and putting some time and effort and money into it to make it really, really, really good, and then release it whenever it was done, as opposed to, okay, it's Monday, got to get a video out. It's Wednesday, got to get a video out. It's Friday, got to get a video out. That's probably what it would be. I don't know if I would ever retire to the Catskills or anywhere else, but it would be nice to be able to take a lot more time and have a lot more resources to spend on doing this thing that I genuinely love to do. I do it because it pays my bills, but I also do it because I genuinely love to do it. And I don't think I would ever want to just outright stop doing it. Here's a question from my favorite ever-changing screen name. This time it's Captain Marvel's okay, but we need Squirrel Girl, the movie, neo-normie. Should there be more superhero movies and TV that's not DC or Marvel, i.e. Dark Horse, Image, Love and Rockets, Heavy Metal Magazine, The Eagle UK, Harrison in 2000 AD, as British comics alone have lots more irony and adult themes that most of the big two aren't very good at. Also, who is your favorite theatrical wrestler? Mine is the Great Muta. Well, yeah, I would love to see more superhero movies based on non-Marvel and non-DC comics. You're absolutely right. There's a lot of really great stuff that has been published outside of the big two that would make great movies. And not even the one that came to mind when I read your question. It's not even really a superhero book necessarily. It's kind of like a cop show set in sort of a fantasy superhero type world. It's a book that Alan Moore wrote years ago. I think it was called Top 10. It was really good. I mean, and a movie or a TV series based on that would be fantastic. I don't think there's ever been one. But you know, you see things like the Walking Dead TV series, which I've never actually watched. It's weird. I read the comics for a while. I've lost track of them now, but I read the comics for a while. I'd never watched the show. But The Walking Dead is, I think it's, what is The Walking Dead? Is it Dark Horse or Image? I think it might be Image. But anyway, it's non-Marvel, non-DC comics and super popular, super successful. And at least when I was reading them, really, really good. So yeah, I would love to see more independent comics be adapted for films or TV shows. Absolutely. I think it would be a really good thing. And my favorite theatrical wrestler ever, Great Muta, is a really good choice. I also love Shinsuke Nakamura. And if you want to take it way, way back, there's a wrestler named Ricky Starr who wrestled in the 50s and 60s, and I think into the 70s, who legitimately, before he became a pro wrestler, was a ballerina. A ballet dancer, I guess I should. I don't know if men are called ballerinas, but a ballet dancer. And he incorporated his ballet skills into his wrestling style. And he was very light on his feet and did a lot of dance moves in the ring, and got over as a babyface. Got over as a babyface everywhere he went, and had a fantastic career as a ballet-based, very graceful, very dancer-like pro wrestler. And if you ever get a chance, go to YouTube and Google, or yeah, go to YouTube and find some Ricky Starr matches, because there are a few that are available from back in the 50s on YouTube, and check it out, because Ricky Starr was amazing. He's just a fantastic, one-of-a-kind wrestler, and he would probably be very high on my list of favorite theatrical wrestlers as well. Next question is from Matthew Rick. Are the Pakled as mentally challenged as they seem, or do they simply lack advanced verbal linguistic skills? And the Pakleds, for the non-Star Trek fans who are with me right now, are a species from an episode. They were prominently featured in an episode of Star Trek The Next Generation from the second season called Peak Performance, and they also showed up a little bit in the background on Deep Space Nine, but they never really had anything significant to do. They were just kind of there. And yeah, they are, I don't know, look, viewing them with eyes today, like from the perspective of where we are today, I don't know, they're a little uncomfortable, because the gimmick is that they are sort of, they come across as being mentally challenged, as being like developmentally disabled people. And that's not cool. You know, I don't think that's not necessarily the interpretation that you have to take. Like, it's not definite that that's what they're meant to represent, but that's how they kind of come across. Very, very sort of simple-minded. And it's sort of like, oh, wow, how did these guys ever make it into space? And then they turn out to be villains. And it's like, oh, good. So the analog for developmentally disabled people are bad guys too. Great. Nice job, Star Trek. So it's a little problematic if viewed from a certain perspective. So hopefully, I mean, I would love to say, yes, actually, it is just that they lack communication skills. It's just that they're not good at communicating, and actually that's it. And they're not meant to be representative of mentally challenged people, because if you look at them through that lens, it's kind of an embarrassing part of Star Trek, to look at and go, oh, why did you decide? Why did you do an alien species that plays very easily as representing mentally challenged people? Because it's not, if that's what it is, and if that's how it's taken by an audience, it's just not cool at all. But yeah, hopefully we can, hopefully it wasn't meant that way, and we can read it as, well, they're not good communicators. Let's go with that. That's the less troubling way to look at it. Here's one from Sean T. Macbeth, or perhaps I should say Sean T. Scottish Play, because somebody pointed that out, that I pronounced it, even though it's his name, I pronounced it in a video, and they were like, you said the name of the Scottish Play in a video. Sean T. Macbeth. I'm not superstitious. Never mind the finger crossing thing at the beginning. I'm not superstitious. I have this long-standing issue of the character of Worf. He is this Klingon who is devoted to the sense of honor, often to a degree that eclipses many of his fellow Klingons. Yet, throughout his Starfleet career, his actions that extend beyond merely having his legitimate concerns being dismissed by Picard or Riker are tantamount to insubordination. In a lot of ways, he's too Klingon for Starfleet, and he's also too Klingon for the Klingon Empire for the 24th century. Is Worf a consistent character? Yes and no. I think in many ways during the Next Generation years, he is inconsistent. But I think when they brought him onto Deep Space Nine, they did a fairly good job of rehabbing him and making him a more consistent character by taking what he was in Next Generation and maybe taking the erratic parts of him or the more inconsistent parts of him and trying to put that into a context where it makes sense. You know, saying, okay, you know what? Yeah, this is how Worf is. The guy you saw on the Next Generation was the real guy, but now let's spend some more time with him. Let's throw some curveballs at him. Let's show him grow and change as a character. And let's try to see if we can figure out a way that it makes sense for him to be that way. And I think they did a really good job of that. I think Worf's years on Deep Space Nine were really, really great for that character. And in many ways were some of the best years for that character, and some of the best uses of Worf were his episodes on Deep Space Nine. So, but yeah, on Next Generation, sure, he was a little bit inconsistently written, but a lot of the supporting characters were. You know, I mentioned in my video about Guinan and Counselor Troy. I mean, the worst example of that is Counselor Troy. Very inconsistently written character. That was one of the things that I think really sort of sabotaged that character and made her come across as not so great, because she was written very inconsistently. And a lot of characters were like that in the supporting cast. Picard usually got out pretty good. Data was usually pretty good. At least once they settled down with Data around season 3 and they kind of nailed down what they wanted him to be and took out a lot of the sort of eccentricities and tics that they gave Data in the early seasons and said, okay, no more of that. This is who he is, and we're just going to go with this. From that point on, he was pretty consistent. But yeah, Worf, you're right. Worf, it's like he's too Klingon for Starfleet, and he's too Klingon for Klingons. I think that's a really good way to put it. But I think they did right by him eventually, and a lot of that was on Deep Space Nine. Next one from Trekkie0623. Hi, Steve. 10 years ago, I was subscribed to several people in the YouTube Skeptic community back then, including people like Thunderfoot and The Amazing Atheist. That's no longer the case, as the misogyny and contempt for social justice that came about eventually made me leave. My question, though, is about why that sort of split occurred in the skeptic community, and whether you think there's anything about skeptics that made the community predisposed to lash out at social justice and feminism, and how we can combat those predispositions. Or are the misogynists in the skeptic community not special at all and genuinely reflect the broader popular response to feminism and social justice, which would be a scary thought. Thanks. I don't think it's as simple as either one of those. I don't think that the anti-feminists and as we are seeing now, unfortunately, the fascists, or the people who are sympathetic or enabling to fascists and white supremacists, etc., in the skeptic community are unique to that community. I think we have those in the skeptic community, and I think other communities have those as well. So that's not a skeptics or an atheists only problem. I do think that because in the 21st century, the sort of revival of atheism, of popular atheism with the Four Horsemen and New Atheism and Hitchens and Dawkins and Harris and Dennett and others, because that encouraged an attitude of intellectual superiority among people, that encouraged people to view themselves as smarter than other people. If you're an atheist, you're smarter than religious people because you figured this out and they didn't. You're smart enough to see that there is no God and they haven't figured it out yet. And also, not only are you smart enough, but you're more objective. You're able to face the facts. You're able to see the truth that other people with their religious mindsets and their wishful thinking aren't able to see. You can see through all the mumbo jumbo and all your own biases and wishful thinking, and you can see the truth. And when you see the truth, you'll accept it because you're a skeptic and you care about science and reason. That mindset wound up being just a flower bed of toxicity, because when people who were used to thinking of themselves as smarter and more rational and more objective than the other person came up against feminists or racial equality activists, they assumed that, well, if they disagreed with those people, well, that they were right and those people were wrong and they were being unreasonable and they were being pushy and they were being too sensitive. And I'm the atheist, I'm the rational one, I'm the reasonable one. My whole worldview, my whole self-identity is based on me being the reasonable, rational, smart one. So of course I'm right and they're wrong. So I think that it inflamed it. You know, it doesn't mean that we're the only community that has such people, but the attitudes of people like I mentioned, and people like you mentioned as well, like Thunderfoot and Amazing Atheist, who really engender a sense of smugness and superiority and usually completely unwarranted self-regard, enabled that to take root and to become a very, very loud and very unfortunately visible part of the community. And then the rest of the community was extremely slow to respond. The rest of us, even if we weren't on board with that, even if we didn't dig the anti-feminist stuff or the really bigoted anti-Muslim talk or anti-Black Lives Matter, anti-racial justice talk, even if we weren't on board with that, we were tolerant of it. We let them go about their business and say, well, there's room there. It's a big tent. There's room for everybody. And that was a mistake, because that is what led to the neo-Nazis, the white supremacists, the fascists to feel as though this was a potential home for them. So I think it's those things combined. It's the sort of the egotism and the cockiness and the lack of introspection and the assumption that you're right and you're the reasonable one, plus the slowness of reaction of everybody else that allowed that sort of thing to happen in the skeptic community, and that we are still having to deal with today. Joe McClory, I have been thinking a lot about woke brands lately. I don't find myself being taken in by a company pandering to my values, but I do find myself wanting to see a company's ad campaign work the moment that assholes start to protest the campaign and company. I know that this is probably part of why these companies seem to focus their branding to poke at the man babies to get this exact reaction, and I wonder how close this is to centrists liking Trump because he owns the libs, or generally finding myself rooting for bad people because they root against worse people. I wonder how you feel about woke brands. Do you think they are helping to spread a good trend, or just profiting off of good trends and possibly even harming them in the long run? Well, I'm a little ambivalent about it and a little cynical about it, because you're right. I mean, at the end of the day, the woke brand is there to sell whatever its product is. So I have to keep that in mind, and I can't get too excited about it or congratulate them too much. And you're right, there is a dark side to it where if they are just piggybacking on an important, potentially very positive social trend because they want to sell some shit off the back of it, like that's not a good thing. But at the same time, and I think I said this a couple months ago when I did a segment about the, about the Gillette ad on a Facepalm 5 video, that cynicism aside, I would rather companies try to market their products by appealing to our better angels than pandering to our worst, most awful instincts. So if Gillette wants to sell razors to people, I would much rather they sell razors in a way that also challenges toxic masculinity and calls the men who are the primary buyers of their products to be better people and to examine their own attitudes, than to try to sell those razors in a way that just appeals to macho bullshit and, you know, classic gender roles and stereotypes, and encourages and reifies very harmful behavior. Like, I would rather, I think woke brands are better than non-woke brands, is basically what I'm saying. I don't think they're necessarily deserving of applause and celebration, but they're certainly better than the alternative. You know, they're not. We should not be looking to brands to set the tone for our culture. But if the culture is at a point where a company feels like they can successfully sell products by appealing to enlightenment, by appealing to social justice awareness, by appealing to concern for equality and inclusion and justice and fairness, I think that's probably a good sign for us in general, you know. Here's one from General Contact Unit Problem Child. When Aron Ra is trying to get conservatives to support separation of church and state, he tends to point out to them that the biggest religion in the Western world will eventually be Islam. If they don't want Muslim prayers in schools, they should support secularism. Do you think him doing that constitutes stoking Islamophobia? If so, should he be called out on it? I think that's probably something that could be phrased differently to make the same point without inflaming Islamophobia or appearing to inflame Islamophobia. It's a very tricky thing. There is a lot of practical value in trying to get someone to accept your argument or agree to do things your way by appealing to their prejudice and saying, well, if you do things my way, it'll be better for you than if you do things your way, because if you do things your way, those people that you don't like are just going to win anyway. Like that, there's a lot of practical value to that, because that can often be very effective, as appealing to a person's prejudices usually is. But I don't think it's a good way to go, because even if you don't mean to, and I certainly don't think Aron means to, you're still sort of, you're conferring a legitimacy to their prejudice. You know, if you say to a Christian, let's say, that they should support secularism because I know you're not on board with Islam, and if we don't have a secular society, that keeps the door open for Islam and Muslims to become the dominant religion in this society, and then we won't be saying Christian prayers in public schools, we'll be saying Islamic prayers in public schools, and you won't like that. You're conferring legitimacy on their Islamophobia. You're saying that their fear is legitimate, and you're appealing to that to get them to support secularism, which is a noble goal. Like, the ultimate goal is noble. I support secularism, and it's true that secularism is the ideal arrangement for all religions, where everybody is treated equally. Everybody has the same rights under the law, and everybody is free to practice their religious faith as long as it doesn't infringe on the rights of anybody else. Like, that's the ideal solution for everybody. The only people who are against that are religious supremacists who want their religion to dominate. You know, everybody else, whether you're a person of faith or not, should want a secular society, because then it's religious pluralism and everybody wins. Everybody's allowed to practice their faith however they want, as long as you don't force yourself, your beliefs on other people, or practice your faith in a way that is harmful to others. You're good. You're golden. Do whatever you want, as long as you're within those parameters. And I think it's better just to make that case, instead of making that case by appealing to a person's religious bigotry. Because even if it's not your intention, and again, I certainly don't think that's Aron's intention, you're still sort of indirectly legitimizing that, you know, in the mind of that person. Even if not in the mind of an observer, you're telling that person, hey, look, your fear of Muslims is at least legitimate enough for me to engage with. Even if I don't share it, it's at least legitimate enough for me to engage with to try to persuade you. And I would just rather not do that. You know, I would just rather not do that. I think there are ways to make that argument without doing that. And should Aron be called out on it? I mean, maybe it might be worth mentioning to him. You know, I don't think he deserves, or I don't think it's warranted to call him out in like a really hostile way and say, you know, what the fuck are you doing? Because again, I don't think it's his intention. And I think overall, you know, his contribution to the conversation has been overwhelmingly positive. I think he's one of the good guys. So I wouldn't want to treat him as an adversary or treat him as an enemy, because I don't think he deserves to be treated that way. But it might be worth having a word about. Sure. Yeah, absolutely. John Brockman, only one question. Okay. Well, my question comes in 13 parts, so you might want to get some more tea. And then John was nice enough to do this delightful visual gag where, see, look, look at all the different parts. And then we get down to 13, and there's the actual question. 13, how's the next season of Steve and Stuffy shaping up? It's shaping up very well, actually. I have the script for the first episode of the new season done, except for the Patreon tag at the end. I still need to write that. But the actual episode is scripted, and I might go through it and do a little bit of a rewrite on it, but I think I'm pretty happy with where it is. And that will actually be next week. This episode, today's episode of the Whirlpool, was the last episode of the Whirlpool for a month. I have the Whirlpool season divided in half. So there's 12 episodes, of which today's was the 12th. And then I'm taking a month off, and there's going to be 4 Steve and Stuffy videos for the next month. And then Whirlpool comes back for 12 more weeks, and then the Whirlpool's done for the year. So there's a 24-episode season for the Whirlpool this year, in 2 12-episode halves, divided by Steve and Stuffy. And then after the Whirlpool second half, there'll be 4 more episodes of Steve and Stuffy, and then I think there will be 4 episodes of something. There will be 4 episodes of something else. Probably the Archbishop Fulton J. Worley show, World of Love. I'll probably do 4 episodes of that. And then Steve and Stuffy comes back for the rest of the year, for the fall run. So that's how it's going to go. So Whirlpool is going on hiatus for a month starting next week, and that will be the return of Steve and Stuffy for this year. And that episode is pretty much written. So it's going very well. It's going very well. And I don't have every single episode of Steve and Stuffy plotted out yet. I like to at least have concepts for every episode. And I don't have every single one plotted out yet, but for the most part, and I know generally where I'm going as far as like an overall story for the season. Like I know what the overall story for the fall run is going to be. So yeah, it's going very well. Thank you for asking. I love the Steve and Stuffy questions. Here's one from some random geek. Hey Steve, I want to kind of reply to your answer to General Contact Unit Problem Child's about forming a new government after a disaster. You said if it is a small enough group of people in the colony, then you would be for direct democracy. I agree. But if the size of the colony is about a medium to a large size city, then you are in favor of representative democracy. That I disagree with. If the colony is too big to be governed by direct democracy and needs representative democracy, why not just split the colony up into 2 or 3 or more communes so that each can govern themselves with direct democracy? Have the people rule instead of representatives rule. It is possible to run governance without someone in charge, like a mayor or president. It happened in the Paris Commune, as Tristan of the channel Step Back History explained in his video on the subject. And there's a link to that video, which I didn't put in the description of this video. I realize now I forgot to do that, but I will add those later on after we're done. So you'll easily be able to check those out. I don't see how it can't work out again, even in today's world. Then have an economic system of cooperation with contracts based on mutual aid instead of an economic system of competition like capitalism. Here is Non-Compete's video on contracts and mutual aid that explains how an anarchist society would work and look like. Please watch this video as well. Again, I'll link that in the description after the stream is over. And I apologize for not doing it beforehand. And it is not that capitalism leads to problems. It has contradictions built into it. Keep labor costs low to keep profits high. But eventually, laborers won't be able to buy the products of their labor, and so the system will collapse. But if disaster did happen where a new society would have to be formed, then it is much easier to do without capitalism, since there will be no capitalist with capital around. No one claiming the land as theirs and theirs alone, and no state with private property laws to protect that private ownership of land as with the police and the military. We can start with the equality of liberty and do away with all coercive, unjustifiable hierarchies like capitalism, the state, cis-heteropatriarchy, white supremacy, and ableism, and no fear of the boss because everyone shares equal responsibility, and no one has any unquestioned power over others. Don't you want to live in that world now, Steve? Well, sure, when you put it that way. Yes, of course I do. It sounds like a very nice place to live, doesn't it? And I think that, I mean, this answer is a little bit of a cop-out, but on the other hand, it might also just be a recognition of reality, which is, it would have been, I think the society you're describing does sound really nice. And if we could have gotten there first, if we had been wise enough and foresighted enough to do that, and or to do that and then stick with that instead of transitioning to a more state-based, capitalism-based society that we have in most of the world today, I think that would be nice. But I don't see how, I just don't see how we get there from here. You know what I mean? And I know that maybe sounds fatalistic. Or maybe it sounds like I'm just throwing up my hands and saying, well, it's impossible. And I know that anarchists and leftists are just do not like that argument because it's sort of self-defeating. Like, well, if we never try, of course we're never going to get there. But it's hard to see. I mean, we would have to start over. And I just don't know if enough people could be convinced to start over in that way to make that feasible. You know what I mean? If you could wave a magic wand and reorganize the world so that we all live in small communes that are governed by direct democracy and don't have the same sorts of hierarchies that we have now and are based on sharing and cooperation and mutual respect and not based on capitalism and competition and exploiting labor and all these fucking just awful things that we have in our society today, that would be great. But I don't see practically speaking how we get there from where we're at now, at least not in any kind of reasonable time. And I know a lot of people, and I think Geek, you may have even mentioned this on one of my Patreon hangouts, because we talk about this a lot, that it might not, that you even accept that it might not happen, that it might not be realistic to expect it to happen within our lifetime or within any human lifetime. It's just something that has to gradually be pushed toward. And if you look at it that way, maybe it is feasible for the long run, you know, but for my lifetime, I don't think I'll ever see it. If we start over, you know, like in that question, then yeah, that would be great. I actually think and it just shows my bias, and it shows my own, the sort of limitations of my own perspective, that it never occurred to me. You know, when I said if a city gets too big, they should switch from direct democracy to representative democracy, splitting up into smaller groups and just remaining self-governing direct democracies instead of a larger representative democracy, like that option never occurred to me. I never even thought to suggest that. So I appreciate that. Like, I appreciate you showing me that new perspective. And if we were starting over, that might be the way to go. But I don't see how we start over from where we are right now. And maybe that's just me being too pessimistic, or not having enough imagination, or not having enough courage, you know, to think, yes, that's what we have to do, and that's what we should be pushing for. I just don't see how we get there from where we are. Next is a question from Josa. Will Trump serve time after he is done being president, be it after 2020 or 2024, or will he slip through the cracks, tied up in court, barred, etc., and retire living comfortably, leaving the country figuratively burning? This assuming he has done something illegal, but for the sake of argument, pretend that is so. Oh, I don't think we need to pretend for the sake of argument. Whether he gets arrested and convicted for something or not, I'm pretty sure the motherfucker has done something illegal. I don't see how I don't see how that's such an outrageous claim at this point. Has he done something illegal? Of course he has. I mean, the question is, can we pin it on him, and will people make him pay for that? I wouldn't put money on it. I would love to see it happen. I would love to see him frog marched out of the White House. But whether it's during his presidency or after his presidency, I would not put money on it. I think the record, the record would compel us to expect people like Trump to get away with their crimes more than they would be punished for them. Like I think that is the more likely outcome. And that angers me and breaks my heart to say, but no, if I were a betting man, I would not bet on Trump doing time for his crimes. I would love to see it happen, and I support it 100%. But I would not bet on seeing it happen. No, I think people like Trump get away with stuff like this way more often than they are made to pay for it, and I think that's probably the more likely outcome, unfortunately. Doesn't mean we shouldn't try, by the way. Doesn't mean we shouldn't try our damnedest to hold him accountable. But I wouldn't, as a bystander, I would not put money on it happening. But God damn it, I hope it does. Nathaniel Robinson, hi Steve. Could you say something about how you talk about the honesty and trustworthiness of scientists when addressing various forms of deniers and conspiracy theorists? I get a hearty chuckle out of the insane theories or outright poor applications of scientific principles that people have. Obviously, their skepticism is not something designed to advance science, but to defend an outdated view of the universe. However, as an historian, I can't deny their claims that scientists can have biases and ulterior motives. Scientists are, of course, all too human. It's not just that for centuries scientists asserted that the universe was more or less stable, the resources of the earth boundless, and our inequalities biologically inscribed within us. When a scientist did research and publish on what might be a dubious subject, say racial degeneration, her or his colleagues often let it pass. They accepted it either wholly or implicitly without putting the dubious theories to the test. It might be harder to hold on to such theories today. We simply have a better capacity to generate information from which to craft and test theories. Nonetheless, we still have scientists, perhaps not university researchers, but professionals with doctorates who work in various industries such as petrochemicals who continue to ignore the problematic aspects of their work. Thanks, NR. Yeah, well, you know, this is sort of like why it's so important to respect science, to look to science for answers, to recognize that science and the scientific method is the best way we have ever figured out to learn things about the world around us. But at the same time, to not put an unshakable faith in the conclusions of science, to know that the conclusions of science are provisional. And they're provisional based not only on our human limitations, but our human fallibilities. You know, we are biased. Scientists, as you point out, scientists are capable of bias. Scientists are capable of warping their results, either consciously or unconsciously, to provide an inaccurate picture of whatever the thing is being studied. That has happened so many times. And one of the things that makes it difficult to correct when it does happen is the faith that a lot of people put in science. You know, I think it was Gretchen Koch, the wonderful cartoonist who I know on Twitter and Facebook, who does the Giant If cartoons, who said, and she may not have originated the saying, but she's the one I associate it with because she's the first person I remember saying this. She said, you know, the scientific method might be unbiased and objective, but I've never seen the scientific method operate itself. You know, people have to do science, and people are fallible, and people are biased, and people are limited. So and people are anything but objective. So the scientific method might be objective, but we are the ones who carry it out, and we certainly are not. So I think we have to remind ourselves of that. We have to remind ourselves that science is the best thing going in terms of learning about the world and increasing human knowledge about the universe, but it is also a human endeavor and therefore imperfect and fallible and constantly up for revision. I think if we get used to thinking of scientific facts as provisional, you know, it doesn't mean you shouldn't believe it. Doesn't mean you shouldn't accept it. You should accept it if the evidence says to accept it, if it's been well substantiated, if it's been well established, and it should be accepted and treated as true. But it should also be treated as provisional. It's true based on what we know. It's true based on the results that we have. It's true based on the best of our ability to know it. It's provisional. It can be changed. It can be overwritten. It can be revised. I think that's important. It's important to keep that in mind as well. But you know, That's that's the best we can do. That's the best we can do, and we hopefully that would enable us to be quicker to point out and reject bad science. You know, even if it's done by a credentialed professional scientist, as you point out, it often is. And final question from Radical Bacon, and it's another Whirlpool question. So, could anyone have a good time at TraditioCon? Well, I suppose if you were a traditionalist Catholic who was not also a narcissistic, super ambitious egomaniac like Michael Worley, you might have a good time. It sounds like the people who went to Noah Worley's talk had a good time, and it sounds like Cardinal Noah himself had a pretty good time. So yes, I suppose it would have been possible to have a good time, whether or not you actually did. But yeah, if you're Michael Worley or of a Michael Worley-ish mindset, certainly not. No. All right, that is it for the patron questions. Now we only have about 15 minutes left in the show. I apologize for that taking so long, but I'm going to spend the last 15 minutes of the show chatting with everybody in the live chat. So if anybody in the live chat has questions for me, I will try to answer as many of them as I can in the time we have left. And as always, I apologize to anyone who asks a question that I don't get to. It's nothing personal. It's probably just that either I didn't see it or I saw it, but I didn't have a good answer, and I just didn't want to try to babble about it in the remaining minutes as I'm doing right now. So let me check out the live chat. Thanks everybody for being with me. Someone asked, I just saw, so yeah, from Ginseng Addict, have I checked out The Expanse yet? No, I have not. I apologize. I have not seen The Expanse. Jesse Wiley, who would win a battle of wits? Second Technician Arnold Rimmer of the JMC mining ship Red Dwarf or Major Frank Burns of the 4077? Two shows that I'm not all that familiar with, unfortunately, but I will go with the Red Dwarf reference and say that Rimmer would win as opposed to Frank from MASH. 255 AD question. Christy Winters has intimated she may not vote for Bernie if he's the candidate. If she stuck to that, would you be mad at her like you were mad at the Bernie or Busters in 2016? I wouldn't be like super pissed at her. Christy has good reasons for saying I'm not voting for Bernie no matter what. Like personally, I would vote for Bernie if Bernie were the nominee. Bernie is not my first choice either. But if Bernie were the nominee, I would vote for him. Especially if the alternative was Trump, but really if the alternative was any Republican, I would still vote for him if he were the nominee. But I would not, like Christy and I would still be friends. I would not, I would not give Christy a bunch of shit about it if she chose not to vote for Bernie. Even though I do think it would be better if she did. Because as shitty as Bernie and his followers especially have been from time to time on particular issues, and as much as he is not my first pick for the nomination, I would not say, I would not say that if Christy didn't vote for him that she was a bad person or anything like that. Frank Voigt is here, who left a comment that inspired my my rewriting the finale of Star Trek Voyager's video. Well, thank you, Frank, for the inspiration. I'm glad you liked the video, and I'm glad that video was taken off. I didn't expect it. It's got like over 20-some thousand views, which for me is a hell of a lot, and I didn't expect it to take off like that. So thanks everybody for liking that video. Trans Gamer Girl says, big thank you for being such a great trans ally. Speaking of which, what did you think of Giorgio's comments about Mirror Stamets being pan in the latest Discovery up? Well, I'm glad that you think of me as an ally. I aspire to be one, so I'm very grateful and humbled that you would say that. Thanks for saying that. And I thought that scene with Giorgio and Stamets and Culber and Tilly was one of my favorite Star Trek scenes from any show ever. And it was one of my favorite scenes from Discovery of the entire series. I thought it was fantastic. It was totally unlike any scene I've ever seen in a Star Trek show. I thought it was great. I thought her sort of getting off on the tension was hilarious. I thought the befuddled and kind of weirded out sort of outraged reaction of Stamets of like, well, I don't know what universe you're talking about, but in any universe, but in this universe and every other universe I can imagine, I'm gay, and so is he. I thought that was great. I thought the frank acknowledgement of the existence of pansexuality as just a thing that people can be, no big deal, was great. And as well as the acknowledgement of people being gay, you know, Stamets coming out and saying, look, I'm gay and so is he. And just, you know, that and doing it defensively, asserting it as something that he was proud of, you know, like, hey, I know maybe the mirror universe me wasn't gay, but I am. So live with it. You know what I mean? Like, I thought that was fantastic. I thought it was fantastic. Adam wants me to chastise him because he failed. Okay. Damn you, Adam. How dare you? I can't believe you failed. Consider yourself duly chastised at whatever you failed at. God, I can't believe it. How could you fail? I don't even know what you failed. I'm sorry. Is that too harsh? Consider yourself duly chastised. Oh, Michael Stipp, nice to meet you. Nice to meet you too. Thanks for coming. Jamie J, our newest moderator on the channel. Jamie J says, hey, Steve, who is the hottest DC Universe character and why is the answer Nightwing? The answer is Nightwing. How did you know? The answer is Nightwing for completely selfish reasons, I must say, because Nightwing was the DC character that I always identified the most with personally. I loved Nightwing. As soon as I found out who Nightwing was, as soon as I learned when I got into comics as a child and a teenager that there was a character who was like the grown-up Robin, that for once they allowed a comic book character to age and to grow up, and the original Robin grew up and now he's Nightwing. He's a completely different character. He has a new costume and a new identity. Like, I thought that was so cool. I love Nightwing. And yeah, okay, Dick Grayson's not a bad looking dude. Look, I'm, you know, it's not necessarily what I'm after in a partner. I'm not, you know, but can't deny the truth when it's looking you in the face. He's a good looking dude. I'm just saying. Stephen Miller says, thank Jamie for sending me your way. Well, thanks, Jamie. Dataport doll, Odo is a fascist, yay or nay? You know, like when he wants to arrest people for offending his girlfriend. He has some kind of fascist tendencies, yeah. Some authoritarian tendencies, I'll put it that way. He has some very authoritarian tendencies, which, yeah. And Odo is one of my favorite characters on Deep Space Nine. I love Odo, but you're right. That's completely fair. Jamie Julian, please give Egg Boy a shout out. He is my son's new hero he's listening to. Okay, I don't even know who Egg Boy is, but assuming Egg Boy is not a terrible person, I will say, hi, Egg Boy. Shout out to Egg Boy. If Egg Boy is not a good person, then I take that completely back. I have no idea who Egg Boy is. Here's a super chat from Humbilly. Thank you, by the way. David Colby's question made me think, before the last 3 Democrat presidents, what other non-fash friendly Democratic president have there been? The last 3 Democratic presidents. So that would be Obama, Clinton, and Carter, right? Before that, what was the last non-fash friendly? Would we say Johnson was fash friendly? I guess he maybe had some authoritarian tendencies. I don't know. And certainly the prosecution of the war in Vietnam was terrible. I don't know. Roosevelt? Would you say Roosevelt had fascist tendencies? I don't know. That's a good question. And another super chat right after that from Miso Trash. Thank you very much for the super chat. Will the ensigns make it to the TNG time? Yes, eventually. The plan is when we get to the end of the original series for the Ensign's Log, we will make a jump to the next generation. Jason, I think, generally has it worked out. We haven't figured out exactly what we're going to do because we're still a very long way off. We're just getting into season 2 of Classic Trek. But yes, the plan is to continue it through to next generation. Absolutely. Progressive liberal, would you rather spend a month stuck in a shuttlecraft with Neelix or Tuvok? I'd rather not spend a month stuck in a shuttle with either of them. Tuvok. Probably Tuvok. Yeah. Tuvok would be easier to take. I'm not as anti-Neelix as a lot of people are. In fact, Neelix kind of grows on me throughout the show. People might be surprised when I say that, like, Voyager is my least favorite Star Trek show, that I don't hate Neelix. And I don't hate Neelix at all. I think he becomes a pretty decent character. But if I'm going to be trapped in a confined space with somebody, it's going to be Tuvok. Because I know Tuvok would leave me the hell alone when I needed to be left alone. And yes, by the way, in case you haven't yet, the Mueller report is not out. It's not public. But the Mueller report has been submitted to the Attorney General. So that's what when people say the Mueller report is out, it means the Mueller has apparently completed his investigation and he has submitted his final report to the Attorney General. Hopefully it will be made public, but it hasn't been made public yet. Okay, 255 AD question. Does Spock ever mention Michael? Please answer in character as your Ensign's Log character. Okay. No, can't say that he does, but I don't really talk to him. So, that's something you could probably ask Jason about. He talks to the first officer a lot more than I do. No, to my knowledge, Spock has never mentioned Michael. And scene. Oh, okay, Adam, you failed with quitting smoking. I apologize. Okay, you failed at quitting smoking. God damn it. How dare you fail at quitting smoking? I am chastising you for that. There. Does that give you what you need? Oh, Yannick Muller, what is your favorite Weimar film? I think didn't somebody ask this before? And maybe I didn't answer it. That's a great question. Meaning Weimar Republic, meaning a German film made during the era of the Weimar Republic, for people who don't know, like the sort of 1920s pre-World War II era of Germany, pre-Nazi Germany. Well, the obvious answer would probably be like Nosferatu, but I would go with another Murnau film and say it's The Last Laugh. I love The Last Laugh. It's one of my favorite movies ever, and it would almost certainly be my favorite Weimar film. I think that counts as a Weimar film. It's pretty late, but I think that counts as a Weimar film. Let's see. Oh, 255 AD. Okay, yeah, I think I would accept being a social democrat, I guess. Social democrat, democratic socialist. I guess I'm not enough of a socialist to call myself a democratic socialist. So I guess social democrat is an acceptable term. Yeah, for me. Yeah, and I take that to mean a Democrat who is devoted, who is committed to things like social welfare and social equality, and the government playing a very important role in creating and enforcing that sort of a society. So yeah, I think that's a fair description for me. Someone who is not anti quote unquote entitlement, that sort of thing. Oh, Egg Boy, of course, the guy who egged the fucking fascist senator. Yes, absolutely. I'm sorry. Yes, I know who Egg Boy is. Yes, Egg Boy is. Yeah, what's his name? He has a real name that I know and I forgot. But yes, Egg Boy is a fucking hero. Yeah, absolutely. He smashed an egg on that fucking asshole senator who was like, well, the problem is letting all these Muslim immigrants in here, referring to the Christchurch shooting. Yeah, fuck that guy. And yeah, Egg Boy is a hero. We should build statues of Egg Boy. So I apologize for not knowing who Egg Boy was when he was referenced at first. Egg Boy is a goddamn superstar. Egg Boy gets a shout out whenever Egg Boy wants one. Egg Boy is a goddamn superstar. Again, I'm scrolling, and I apologize for missing some questions. Here's one from Pro Black Queer. Trek question: which 5 Star Trek characters would you want to see battle Star Wars Empire with all Starfleet ships, including Section 31 cloakies? I have no idea. I cannot possibly answer this question in the last couple of minutes of this show. I apologize for reading your question and not having an answer. It sounds kind of like, let me see, what 5 I guess, well, Cisco would have to be there. Janeway, she's good in a fight. Whatever else I have with her, other problems I have with her character, she's good in a fight. Yeah, so Cisco, Janeway, Kirk, obviously. Jellicoe is my man. I don't know. Maybe, you know what? Maybe like Mirror Universe Captain Lorca from Discovery would be good in a fight. And, I guess for the, the Defiant, the Enterprise E. I don't know. Yeah, that would be good. Good question. Sorry I had such a shitty thrown together answer. Yeah, Roosevelt. Yeah, the internment of Japanese Americans by Roosevelt was indefensible. You're right. That is a notch in the fascist column for Roosevelt, without a doubt. Absolutely. Michael Ventures, Steve, what is your opinion on the way Fox is going after AOC, and now AOC is getting death threats, and the way O'Reilly, when he was on after George Tiller yeah. Well, I think Fox is one of the most irresponsible networks on TV. I think the AOC getting death threats, and also, what was it? Talia Lavin, I think. Was it Talia Lavin? Has been tweeting about how she was featured on I think the Laura Ingraham show last night, and she's been getting just tons of hatred and abuse as a result of it. They have such a toxic reactionary audience, and they have absolutely no sense of proportion or respect about doing that sort of thing. It doesn't surprise me at all. Okay, I'm going to wrap up the show, but first I have one last super chat from Nathaniel Peterson. Thank you very much. And the question is, any plans to see Us soon? Are you excited to see Peele's take on the Twilight Zone? I would love to see Us. I might make an effort to see it in the theater. I'll probably wait for it to come out on streaming, but I definitely want to see it. I expect it to be fantastic, because Jordan Peele is just like a genius. I've been a fan of his for years. And I thought Get Out was amazing. So I don't know if I'll see it. I don't know if I'll see it in the theater, but I'll definitely see it. And yes, I am super excited for his Twilight Zone. That CBS All Access is going to get my money for a while yet. They've got it until the end of Discovery, and they're very smartly starting up Twilight Zone right after Discovery finishes up. So they're going to get my money afterwards as well. So, okay, I'm going to have to wrap up the show now. I apologize to everybody who asked questions that I did not get to. That's probably my fault, because I didn't answer them fast enough. But I appreciate all of you being with me and asking questions, whether you're a patron and you asked a patron question, or whether you asked questions in the live chat. Thanks to everybody for the super chats. Thanks to everybody for the questions. I want to remind you, as always, in addition to the videos, that I co-host a couple of podcasts on the Let Me Listen Podcast Network, which you can hear on letmelistenpodcast.com, and they're also linked in the description of this video. Late Seating and the Ensign's Log. There's a new Ensign's Log up today. Check out the Ensign's Log if you haven't, and you love the Star Trek stuff especially. The Ensign's Log is like the best thing ever. It's my favorite thing that I do, probably. And also, please, please, please do not forget, as I mentioned already before at the beginning of the show, I will mention it again here at the end, the fundraiser for my partner on the Ensign's Log, really the guy who makes the Ensign's Log happen, and also Late Seating and all of the Let Me Listen podcasts, Jason Harding, his emergency housing fundraiser. Please, if you can donate at all, please donate. No amount is too small. Every little bit helps. He needs $4 grand. He is already over halfway to that goal. So please, let's do what we can to make him reach that goal as soon as possible. And if you can't afford to donate, which is completely understandable, I know a lot of people are in difficult financial straits. If you can't afford to donate, please at least share the link. And the link is in the description of this video, as well as the fundraisers for several other of my friends who unfortunately need a little bit of help as well. Any help you could give, even if it's just sharing the link on social media, would be greatly appreciated. And now to jingle my own coin cup, there's also my Patreon. If you enjoy the work that I do here on YouTube and you want to help me continue to do it, and you also want to be able to submit questions for future Ask Away editions ahead of time that are guaranteed to be answered during the show, you can become a patron at any level at patreon.com/Steve Shives. $5 a month or more gets you a shout out at the end of a Facepalm 5 video and also a Trek Actually video. But any amount from $1 on up, one of the benefits is you get to pre-submit questions for Ask Away that I will answer, as I did and as I always do at the beginning of each show. So thank you, everybody, for joining me. Thanks to all of you who are here live. Thanks to all of you watching. That's it. I will see you in 2 weeks for another one of these. Take care, everybody.